George Clooney has put out a message today about his civic duty. Frankly, I think it's about arrogance and rather more than the burden of truth. And this, in America, they call it an op-ed. In here, I would call it an editorial that he published in the newspapers. It betrays arrogance masquerading as sincerity, and the chaos of Trump's early presidency outs George Clooney for what he is, unfortunately, because this is the direct result of his interference. It's a peculiar form of chutzpah in always believing that it's your job to tell the truth. Hollywood, as we know, specializes in illusion, but George Clooney has spent much of his career trying to be the exception, the earnest man in the room, the suave moralist in the tuxedo, and yet in 2024 that very impulse, that self-declared civic duty, made him a political player in a game that demands far more than good grooming and good intentions. The road to hell, after all, is paved with good intentions, and we are surely basking in the first flames of destruction at the moment, under the watchful gaze and the implementation, the lever cranking of Donald Trump and Musk. Clooney's now, and Vance, of course, Clooney's now infamous New York Times op-ed urging Joe Biden to step down after a disastrous debate performance was framed as an act of democratic conscience. He said, "I had to tell the truth. People on my side weren't telling the truth." Very noble, but there's a razor-thin line between courage and hubris. And to what extent was Clooney speaking for the people, and to what extent was he speaking over them? And let's not forget, this wasn't an isolated intervention. Just 3 weeks prior, he'd hosted a fundraiser for Biden that had raised $28 million. Then came the rhetorical whiplash. 1 minute, a standing ovation. The next, a literary knifing in the New York Times. Is that civic duty, or is that betrayal with a press release? It must be said, Clooney is not new to politics. He's long inserted himself into serious matters, from Darfur to Democratic fundraisers, from UN speeches to editorials in the newspapers. But this is not the 2000s. We're no longer living in an age where liberal Hollywood can cast itself as the nation's moral compass. The Trump presidency has shattered that illusion deliberately, chaotically, in 3 months and at full volume. And yet, rather than step up, Clooney stepped back. And here's the paradox. If the Democratic Party was so mired in cowardice, and if Biden was so visibly unfit, why didn't Clooney, a man with resources, popularity and political reach, run himself, put himself forward as a candidate? If you think you're the only adult in the room, perhaps you should try sitting at the head of the table. Clooney argued that this is about age, nothing more, and that's precisely the problem. His diagnosis was simplistic. His crisis of leadership cannot be reduced to age alone. And in truth, it was not about communication, strategy, authenticity, and the Democrats' long-running identity crisis in the post-Trump era. It was about George Clooney having his moment in the spotlight. You know, he's already done that. He played Batman. And for all Clooney's talk of duty and honesty, the outcome of his truth-telling? A fractured Democratic base, a news cycle obsessed with celebrity over substance, and the growing suspicion that Clooney's intervention, however well-intentioned, fed the very instability he claimed to fear. Of course, Clooney is no fool. He knew criticism would come, and he seemed to welcome it. That's the rules, he told Jake Tapper. Take a stand and deal with the consequences, and fair enough. He's done that before. But this wasn't about war in Iraq or Darfur. This was about domestic power, party discipline and timing. And it's also worth noting the sheer tone of the intervention. Clooney said Biden's age can't be reversed, as though the presidency is a cosmetic condition. He praised Biden for stepping aside as the most selfless act since George Washington. One almost chokes on the hyperbole now that we look at what there is in the White House instead. And yet here lies the central irony. Clooney ended his Broadway run of Good Night and Good Luck, playing journalist Edward R. Murrow, a man who challenged McCarthyism with facts and courage. But Murrow didn't just speak truth to power. He had a platform, a method and a plan. Clooney seems to have only a microphone. And now he's pivoting, endorsing Wes Moore for 2028, calling him a proper leader. That's fine, even admirable. But again, one wonders, is Clooney helping to build or simply narrating the decline? There is undeniably something appealing about George Clooney, the charm, the politics, the espresso ads. But what he revealed last year was not just truth, it was frustration, exasperation, and perhaps an inflated belief in his own role in the Republic. Sometimes truth-telling, especially when belated and selectively deployed, does less to liberate a people than to aggrandize the speaker. If George Clooney truly believed the stakes were existential, if he truly thought American democracy was on the line, then the question isn't why he co-wrote the editorial, it's why he didn't run.